USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Edge for Friday, February 17th, 2023. Each week we handicap and prognosticate a bit about some top games this weekend. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa. Secure your seats at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin. Some interesting games here. Maybe not every game is a premier game, but certainly interesting from a wagering standpoint. And right at the top of the list, a team that got upset on the road last weekend. Number 2 Minnesota is minus 175 at number 7 Penn State, which is a plus 140. 6.5 is the over-under, which might even be low. But how about these two teams in this matchup?
You know, as I've been calling for picks among our staff, I'm shocked by the number of people that are taking Penn State over Minnesota. I think right now it's probably 75% are taking Penn State. I get the reasoning. Minnesota lost last week. But my reasoning, I will give my reasoning against it. Dan, you can give yours on the other side. But I have a hard time thinking that Minnesota is going to drop a second straight game where they could clinch the Big Ten regular season championship. And that's what they can do on Friday night. So I think that they're going to be more ready than they were against Wisconsin. Yeah, that was a stinker to drop at Wisconsin, but it's probably a good loss. I always talk about those good losses when you're coming down the stretch and things are working just a little too easy for you. Sometimes you need to get recentered. And I would think that 3-1 loss on the road at Wisconsin was the recentering point for Minnesota.
I had a hard time kind of figuring out what I wanted in this one. I think the reason why I took Penn State was honestly as the home underdog in this, like from a value standpoint. And when I make my picks, I kind of take the picks based. I don't actually take the picks that people see on our website. That's not me deciding who I think is going to win. That's who I think I should bet in this situation. And while the bet then becomes, okay, I think that means the team's going to win. Penn State at plus 140 is too much value at home against Minnesota for me to kind of wager against it. And because I think Penn State's really good. I mean, Penn State to me, when you look back over what they did, you know, yeah, they've lost 3 of the last 4 of the last 6, but and going back, they've actually been struggling pretty bad since they played RIT. So I'm going to blame Ed for all of this. But the fact is, you know, when you look at it, I'm sorry, my own joke gets me caught up there. But I think I'm going with Minnesota. I didn't realize what I was doing there, Ed. I'm going to make you edit this a little bit. My big complaint about Minnesota isn't so much the loss to Wisconsin as much as it was, you know, the Michigan loss or the loss to St. Cloud. I think both of these teams could lose any given game. And for that reason, I got to go with Penn State in the value pick because I think they both could lose this game. And so I'm going to take the value pick. I will say this, just hammer the over. It's the Big Ten. I said it last week. Just go with the over.
I agree on the over part. I can't agree with Penn State. They have not played well. They're still right there. I get it. But like I said, when Minnesota does not need this many opportunities to clinch the Big Ten regular season. They should just take it this Friday. I feel like that will be the major impetus for why they play really well.
I think if this game were in Minnesota, I might feel significantly different. I just don't really like Penn State as a home dog. I just don't like the way that looks to me, and that's kind of why it stinks.
Well, one thing we know is this is going to be a track meet of a game, but I think the edge on playing defense has to go to Minnesota.
I want to know over under 100 shots.
over. Someone might hit 50 and easily hit 50. This may be one of those when we look at the shot chart. It's going to be bombs away from everywhere. I know. What do you like to say, Ed? Penn State shoots from the popcorn stand.
Jim likes to say that. I like to quote Jim saying that.
That's my line.
Yeah. Minnesota is going to be able to hang with them. So I do think if you bet the under and you win on that, then I mean, isn't that why we watch the games? Like that's that. There you go. As you look at it, and be like everything points to the over, so let's bet the under.
1-0 shutout.
The one thing you do know is the atmosphere is going to be incredible in there. If you're going to Pegula Ice Arena, bring your earplugs so that you don't go deaf by the end of the game, because the over 100 dB volume in that arena is pretty typical.
Yes. Yeah. And if you wear an Apple Watch, you get the warning every 5 minutes.
Yes, exactly. Well, let's look at another one on our list. And this one is in the ECAC, and not a surprising money line. Yale is plus 300 at number one Quinnipiac, which is a minus 450. The over and under on this one is 5.5. This one has all the makings of just a blowout. But is there something else we could possibly expect or possibly think about if we were going to bet this game?
No. Nope. Sorry.
It's a rivalry game. I guess that is one thing I will say. It is a rivalry game. And we also have seen that newly minted number one teams do not usually fare well. All of that said, I'm with Dan. Nope. This should be Quinnipiac's. Shouldn't be hard. It's at Quinnipiac. I know that these two are rivals. I would expect north of 50 minutes of penalties. And if it went over 100, I wouldn't be surprised. The over under at 5.5, I think it could have been lower. Yale doesn't score much. Quinnipiac doesn't give much up. But I think Quinnipiac could score 5 on their own, and maybe one sneaks in, so 6 is possible. I wouldn't touch it though.
There is one thing about Yale, and this is one of those things that I got to go back to when you look at the numbers, is the fact that they've been a completely different team the second half of the year than the first half. First half of the year, they went 4 games without a goal and 4 straight games without a goal at the start of the season, and they had some problems there, and it was actually one of those things that. When they came out towards the end of the year, I actually talked to Keith Elaine about the team and the fact that they had got the shootout win up at Clarkson, and they were starting to get the wheels churning a little bit, and he was pretty happy with the way the team had started to turn the corner. And then you look at the numbers the second half of the season to give you an idea of how bad Yale had been first half of the year. They scored 8 goals in a shutout sweep over Clarkson and St. Lawrence. They won those games 4-0, 4-0. They scored 3 goals against Union and RPI last week and scored 4 goals at the Connecticut Ice Tournament. And their season average is still under 2. So that is, if you're looking at the numbers, this is a team that doesn't score goals, but they've scored goals the last month or so. Better defensively, but it's at Quinnipiac, which does a really good job of handling its business against teams in its league that it needs to win. So, I mean, this one conceivably, even on the over-under, when we're talking 5.5, I mean, I could see this being a 4-0 Quinnipiac win or a 4-1 Quinnipiac win, and that hits the under. That's what makes it kind of icky.
Yeah. That's why the number I think is really good. I would like it. And you mentioned Quinnipiac's home ice. They are undefeated on home ice, 12-0-1 this season.
Yeah, and this is not a weekend that Quinnipiac, who's fighting for a number 1 seed, possibly number 1, I think overall in the pairwise. I think what are they, 2 or 3 in the pairwise? This is not.
They'd have a big. It would be a big climb for them to get to number 1.
They can't lose these games though. These are the games that they absolutely cannot lose. Yale and Brown, they just can't do that. So. I venture to think that they're gonna win this one pretty handily.
Speaking of rivalries, isn't this one of those rivalries that's a little one-sided in that it's a bigger rivalry for Quinnipiac than it is for Yale?
Maybe, yeah. Yale, a lot more history. Their Ivy League rival in Harvard. It's not like football, but it's still a big rivalry. But I think in this era, of Keith Elaine and Rand Packnold, I don't think there's any love lost between those two coaches. None. So I think that maybe exacerbates the rivalry just a little bit more.
And it's funny how certain teams, whether it's because of success or playing style or personalities, just seem to draw more dislike from other teams than other teams might. And not to say a bad thing, to say a good thing, that's probably the case of Quinnipiac. They are probably not very well liked out there because of their success.
It's very similar to, as a Patriots fan, what the Patriots face. Everybody hates the Patriots except for Patriots fans. Everybody hates Quinnipiac except for Quinnipiac fans. And it's because of success.
Stole that line right away from me. I was actually thinking the exact same thing. But even looking back over the last few years, and bear in mind that Yale post-COVID was one of the teams that took COVID on the chin, the punch on the chin, probably the worst. I think they had 20-something first year, second year guys on the roster last year, and they were so young. Even in the years before COVID, they were not going out and beating Quinnipiac with any type of regularity. I think it's been more than a few years since they actually went out and beat Quinnipiac, let alone beat them on the road. And so, I mean, streak's got to end at some point, but it's just one of those things where you haven't beaten them. I'm even going back, just clicking through, and I mean, this is, stat checking, doing it on the fly here. There aren't many wins, and I'm already back to 2016, 2017. So that's a lot of history that you got to try to turn back with a team that right now nobody's near Quinnipiac right now in that league.
When you talk about the Ivies, except for perhaps Cornell and Harvard, there's really a recruiting and a transfer portal disadvantage for the Ivies. They can't keep their grad students. They can't really bring in the grad students. They are hurt by the transfer portal. And once the fifth year eligibility fades out from COVID, maybe that'll help them out, but that has hurt them too.
No, yeah, it's tricky. And there is a reason why when you look at ECAC right now, the bottom three teams are Ivy League teams. But there is also in the league itself, and that the league is tightly packed. So even though you have three teams down the bottom, one weekend's worth of work could actually shove a team like Yale or a team like Brown into the conversation for home ice in that first round. So I think ECAC in general got pounded by COVID. And I know that the recruiting right now with the fifth years and everything in the transfer portal, like that's obviously the thing that everyone's talking about the most. But I would argue that we need a couple of more years to see kind of how it's going to impact these teams, because a lot of them were blown to smithereens and shreds by the actual COVID year.
By the way, you were trying to do the research on the fly. I'll give it to you. It was exactly we're recording on the 18th. It was exactly 12 years ago today, the last time that Yale beat Quinnipiac in Hamden. So it's been a while.
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, we actually haven't invented time travel. We're recording on the 16th, but the point still stands.
Oh, sorry. The 18th date.
That's all right. Well, we're going to take a break and travel back to 2023 and look at three more games. You're listening to USCHO Edge, sponsored by the NCAA Frozen Four in Tampa, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena.
All right, class, it's the NCAA Men's Frozen Four. Welcome to Fandom 101. Want to help your team rule the rink? Here's your assignment. Lesson 1, go big for every goal. 2, when you bring it, bring enough for the whole class. And 3, attendance is encouraged, but passion is mandatory. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Buy your tickets today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
We're back with USCHO Edge. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin. Number 18, UMass Lowell, -110 at a -120 Providence. The over-under on this one, 5. Very important game for both teams.
Both of them are jockeying for Hockey East position. I don't know if either of them really have a ton of hope for the possibility of an NCAA at large bid. They probably have to win their conference tournament, in my opinion. But yeah, this is a big series for jockeying, and and you would think that maybe UMass Lowell, they're ahead of Providence right now. You would think that they would have the advantage in this series, but if there is one team, and I really mean this, one team in Hockey East that has had Lowell's number often over the years, it's Providence. I don't know why. It's one of those teams that just matches up well with what Norm Bazin does. They're very similar in styles. And there's been some crushing losses for Norm Bazin. I think that was one of the teams. There's very few games that he has lost when he's had a 2-goal third period lead. And I remember a 2-goal third period lead slipping away against Providence down there a number of years ago. So the fact that this game is in Providence makes it sensible that they would be the favorite, given all that I just mentioned. And an over-under of 5, this a 2-1 game would not shock me here. A 7-2 game or a 6-3 game or even a 5-4 game probably would. These teams don't usually give up much. So 5 is probably the right number. There's no value to 5, though. None.
No, none. And that's part of why I picked Providence, was because when I was looking over the numbers on this one, it's one of those where Providence has not played well recently. No. They haven't played well since probably mid-January, and the win over Vermont aside, I didn't like what I even saw in that game, and they won that game 3-1. I actually watched that one. But I didn't love Providence as a pick, but yeah, if you're looking at them and you're saying, hey, they're going to turn it around at some point, it's going to be Lowell that does it. I mean, it's for all the reasons that you said. And I hate saying that because I love what I've seen out of Lowell at different times, and they played pretty well in January into February. I know the UNH game wasn't great, and you go to a shootout against Maine and you beat them in the shootout. That's always a good sign. But I don't love Lowell in this matchup, and they've been better. They've been better against Providence as of late. The last couple of years, I want to say there was probably the last year pre-COVID. I remember them being okay then, but I don't love the matchup, and so that's why I said Providence will win, especially at home. And this is one where don't root for fun. Don't take the over. Just if you're going to root for fun, you're going to set yourself up in goal scoring. You're just setting yourself up for disappointment. Root for defense here.
Yeah, this is a game that you'll be sitting at, and you've bet the over, and it will be 1-1 with 3 minutes left in the third, and you're ripping your ticket up, and you know that you're not going to see 3 goals. You're praying for a late goal and 2 empty netters is what you're praying for at that point. Just to get a push.
You're not getting it, and just don't do that to yourself. I always say in basketball, if you're going to bet basketball and you bet the over, root for fun. Like root for offense, root for fun. You're not getting fun here. You're getting defensive goaltending, defense and goaltending, and that's fun to watch. Just not when you're trying to watch for goals and bet the over.
I will say I do like Lowell here. I don't know that I like them both nights, but I feel like they're going to show up with a good road game. They know how much they need this series. They know that they want to separate themselves from Providence in the standings. Really, Providence is the only team that can keep them from getting a first round bye. I know that's mathematically not correct, but in common sense, looking at the Hockey East standings, it would be Providence that would keep them out of getting that first round bye and making them play an opening round game. So I think that Norm Bazin will be able to communicate that to his team, and they are playing better lately. That game against Maine the other day, I called that on Essen, one of the best hockey games I've seen all year. A 1-1 game, both goals scored in the first 6 minutes. And then goaltending was just stood out. Both goaltenders, Victor Osman and Henry Welsh, who got put in, and he's been backing up most of the season, or at least the second half. Gustav Griggles, but he gets thrown in on Sunday, and he made an unbelievable save with about 2 seconds left in overtime on a 2-on-0. So I like Lowell here, but again, maybe Providence could be their kryptonite yet again.
My initial thought on this game is a couple of teams that are underachieving, but I want to back off on that one for UMass Lowell. You see them kind of sagging in the pairwise, but you got to go back to those 2 home losses to Alaska Anchorage that count as 2.4 losses in the pairwise to a team low in strength of schedule, and that has really hurt the Riverhawks. Providence, Jim, you've mentioned how Nate Lehman has talked about them kind of being up and down and maybe not always having a great time. I guess it depends on which Providence team you're going to catch this Friday.
Correct. They have a lot of ability there. They have a lot of speed. and they can make this a fast game. And if they do, I think that might be their area of success. But if they get slowed down by Lowell, if they don't get to the dirty areas, scoring could be tough. And Lowell does seem to find ways, especially of late on the power play. They've been decent. They struggled against Maine the other day, but last weekend had the power play opportunities. I'm sorry, 2 weekends ago they had the power play opportunities and scored. So it'll be a good matchup. I'm calling the game on Saturday night at Lowell on ESPN Plus. So I look forward to that one.
Here's a game that is always going to be a packed house and a lot of energy at North Dakota. Number 6, St. Cloud State comes in at -130. They had the weekend off last weekend, probably much needed for Brett Larson's team. They had a pair of losses at Minnesota Duluth, 2 ties with shootout wins at Miami. So yeah, they got 4 out of 6 points, but they really they definitely wanted, and they probably should have had 6 that weekend. Coming in against North Dakota, we know that North Dakota's had a down season, a great power play, iffy goaltending. They come in after 2 losses at Denver. North Dakota +100, over under is 6. The first thing that strikes me about this one is how close the odds are.
It certainly is for teams that are at the opposite end of the NCHC standings. St. Cloud, I know that they're in a big, massive tie for second, and they could be in 4th in a day. In North Dakota, they're in a log jam down at the bottom, and they could be in 5th in a day. But the reality is if St. Cloud were to sweep this weekend series, they would probably cement a rematch in St. Cloud 3 weeks later in the NCHC quarterfinals. Right now, these 2 teams have the chance to align. Tiebreakers are not my forte when I'm on the air. I don't know exactly how the tie would break right now between St. Cloud, Omaha, and Western Michigan. But let's say St. Cloud and North Dakota were 2-7 right now. St. Cloud wins 2 more. They cement themselves maybe in that 2nd spot. North Dakota at that point will probably cement itself in the 7th spot, and you get a clash again. But there are 3 weekends left in the NCHC. Some of the leagues only have 2 because they have to start their playoffs a little early for an extra round of play. There's only 3 rounds of play, and 2 of them take place at the Frozen Face-Off. Am I saying that one right? NCHC at the Frozen Face-Off. So I look at there's still hope for a lot of teams in this league, but let's face it, North Dakota is probably not climbing into a top 4 spot. St. Cloud's not falling below 4, and they're probably not climbing into the number 1 spot with Denver now, holding an 8-point lead with just 6 games left. So it's interesting, but I think my gut would say go St. Cloud here, even though the game's in North Dakota. I know that Dan will probably tell me something different because he loves home underish dogs.
You're wrong. You're wrong. You're actually wrong on this one. And I'm going to get my. We'll worry about the home underdog conversation when we come back to it in one more pick. But I will say this, and this is going to get me in trouble in Grand Forks. I just don't think North Dakota's that good. I mean, they're just not. Beginning of the year when we were picking North Dakota, I think I took North Dakota as a home underdog way back when the season started, and I said, it's North Dakota. How do you look at this team and bet against them at home? And I don't even remember who they were playing. I think it might have been Bemidji no, it wasn't Bemidji. I don't even remember who it was. And I was just like, I don't understand how North Dakota carries these expectations every year and then they can't fall through. They can't fall through the cracks. It's North Dakota. Well, they did. And here we are, end of the year, and you are what your record says you are. You are what the numbers say you are. And North Dakota, if you were putting them against, any half the teams in the country, I'd probably take them. Problem is, St. Cloud's in that group that I'm not taking them. And St. Cloud is got to be better. They know they have to be better. That Miami series was not good for them. Giving up points to Miami in general when you're a 1st or 2nd place team in the league is not good. So I just don't see it. And it's on the road in Grand Forks at the Ralph. It's going to be packed. It's going to be amazing. North Dakota's just not that good. That doesn't mean anything to me this year. And maybe if they were playing Omaha, maybe if they were playing Duluth, maybe if they were even playing, Providence, and we'll say it's a hockey, those mid-tier Hockey East teams, realizing Omaha is tied with St. Cloud right now for second. I might be inclined to take them as a home underdog, but not against St. Cloud, not right now.
I will say that of any fan base, and I said you said you'd get killed by North Dakota fans. They probably won't, because that is a fan base that when they know their team is bad, they are very self-aware, and they recognize that you can beat up North Dakota because they're just not that good. And unfortunately, I do think that's this team this year. They're just not that good.
The last one on our list has number 13 Minnesota State -150 at Bemidji State +120. The over and under on this one is 5. There is so much here. A rivalry game. Minnesota State was swept at home by Bemidji earlier in the season. Meanwhile, the Mavericks have gone 9-1, and that one loss, an overtime loss. They've gone 9-1 in their last 10 in the league. They're coming in off a bye week. But it's a rivalry, and it's not just a rivalry recently in the CCHA or WCHA. These teams have been rivals for over 4 decades, going back to Division II and Division III and NAIA. There's a long history there. Also, 2 great coaches behind the bench. We talked with Mike Hastings this week. They're really revved up for it. We know Tommy Serratori is a coach that can really get a team ready for a special situation, and you never know what to expect there, except a great performance by the Beavers. Boy, if I had to pick one game to go be at, it might be this one this weekend. But what do you see with this one? A -150 for the Mavericks, +120 for Bemidji at home, and a low over under of 5.
Yeah, this is actually a little tougher than I thought it would be to pick. I like Minnesota State here. They're on a heater. They're playing well. They got some time off, and Mike Hastings said, it was good time off. They needed it to heal. They needed it for their mental sanity. They even, health wise, not just bumps and bruises, but, some guys with some of the stuff you get seasonally right around beginning of February when you live in Minnesota. I get it. Like, you've got to find a way to get yourself better for a stretch run. And that's what his team was able to do last week. But Bemidji's heading the other direction. So it makes it feel like an automatic to me, but you just brought up the reason it's not. It's because it's Tom Serratori, and this guy in a 1 or a 2 game scheme knows how to beat teams. And they've already shown that they can beat Minnesota State, sweeping them up, in Mankato. That was a fantastic weekend series there right before break. But that was also the series that kind of recentered Mankato. They've been 9-1 since those 2 losses. So I kind of wonder, where exactly everything is falling for both of these teams. I don't know if Bemidji has fallen apart, because it certainly hasn't been a good second half. But even if they have, is this the night? Is this the weekend where they can rectify things when you get to play your rival? You get to play the number one, the team with the highest winning percentage in your league. I can't say number one team because they're still technically in second place, but this is Minnesota State knows what's on the line. If they don't carry things out this weekend, then when they play Michigan Tech next weekend, you might not even have the regular season championship on the line. So I think that this is a fantastic game, but I'd have to go with Minnesota State, the Mavericks, in this one. I
found it brutal to look when I was looking at these. Largely too, it's so hard to beat a team 3-4 times when you're in the conference and you're both kind of equals in the conference. This isn't like you were the top seed taking 4 games from the bottom seed. This isn't one of those situations. And because Bemidji swept Minnesota State on the road, I was like, well, Minnesota State's going to get one back. I just don't know if it's going to be on Friday. Like you said, one game, the rule of Serratori comes into play for me, which is that family knows how to get guys up, and Tom Serratori knows how to get his team ready. I will say that we're going to know really early, I think, in the game, because Bemidji has been very good in the first period, and Minnesota State is a team that scores a ton of goals. So I think we're going to know early if Minnesota State comes out and scores 1 or 2 goals in the first period, then I think Bemidji's in trouble. Like they have not been a great third period team this year. If they are able to hold Minnesota State, that at least gets you into the later periods where maybe this might actually hit the under. But this is a really tough one to handicap. I might stay away from the actual pick. I think Bemidji is who I went with as the home underdog, because I think Bemidji is a little bit better than, in that situation when you have 2 evenly matched teams. I tend to take the underdog for value, especially at home. And I love home underdogs, as Jimmy, you pointed out. But we're going to know early if this is going to be going to hit the under or not, because otherwise, if Minnesota State gets going early, then that over under a 5 is going to get obliterated at some point with a 4-2, a 5-2 type of game.
I will say, Mike Hastings kind of alluded to it when we talked to him this week. They can't chase this game. If they fall behind, that was the formula for Bemidji when they beat them when they beat Minnesota State in December. Minnesota State has to either stay even or get an early lead on the road. That's really important. They can't go down 2-0 and try to fight back into this one. And I will correct something I said. I said, Minnesota State doesn't want to lose these and maybe take themselves out of the possibility of chasing a league championship next week. They're going to be in it no matter what, because Michigan Tech is idle this week. They can't gain any more points. So Minnesota State will either be down a point going into the final weekend, or they will be in a position where they have a little bit of a lead and are trying to close out a championship next week.
I will just throw one other thing in there about the coaching matchup in this, because I didn't mention this about Mike Hastings. Is we look at some of these matchups and we talk about the coaches and we talk about the teams. Sometimes you get like one of those the high profile coaches, like the ones that tend to show up in the conversation for NHL teams every year. From a pure hockey standpoint, from just 2 hockey guys scheming and going at it, you might not find a better matchup than Mike Hastings and Tom Serratore. Like, this is just 2 hockey guys who know everything about each other's teams, who are going to game plan and get their teams ready to execute against one another. It's just a hockey matchup, and that to me makes it probably the game of the weekend to watch.
Yeah, 2 guys who exude the competence and confidence of humility.
Yep.
Two great hockey minds. And with that, I think we'll wrap up. This has been fun, guys. USCHO Edge is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Get your tickets at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Find our podcast at uscho.com/podcasts, or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. For Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Edge.